store fat, doesn't want to let it go. And if you want to do something, you better eat more or just sit there, be lazy. The body's not giving up its fat. The other example is an adolescent growth spurt. Oh, there's my son. So if you have teens, you'll notice that their growing teens are like always lazy and they don't want to wake up in the morning to go to school. And they eat a lot. So now when you say that, they are growing because they're lazy and they're overeating? Or would you say that because they're growing, that's why they're overeating? Or did I say that right? So they're not overeating, they're not growing because they're overeating and becoming lazy. They're actually overeating and becoming lazy because they're growing. The body needs the energy to grow. So they're overeating and becoming lazy because the body needs the calories. Same thing happens for metabolic syndrome. Your body wants to store. So you want to eat more. So now let's visit this. So let's conclude this part. And that is insulin-driven fat storage is the #1 reason for our growing waistlines. Carbs stimulate the addiction centers of our brain, making it difficult to remove them from our diets. And chronic carb consumption switches our metabolism to a preferentially storage mode. You want to store instead of burning it. And while the fat is locked away and not available for daily use, we get hungry for more food, and in the absence of food, we get lethargic. So the conclusion, the main takeaway point from this section is, we are not getting fat because we overeat and we stay lazy. But actually we overeat and we stay lazy because our body wants to gain fat. That is the cause and effect of overeating and obesity.
So that's pretty depressing, because what do you do about this then?
That'll come in the part 3 where you can switch it. You can make your body an efficient fat burner instead of relying on carbs for your major part of your energy. And that's part 3. How we reverse this trend. Everybody's okay or not falling asleep? Need a break? Okay, then I'll keep going. How we reverse this trend. So in this part, mainly the goal is to transform our metabolism to burn more stored fat. So the goal should be to rely on your stored body fat instead of food. I mean, you need food, obviously. But when it's not there, your body should be able to switch between getting energy from food or getting energy from the stored body fat. And you should store less from the food. And the idea is to convert you from a carb burner when you're so reliant on carbs. You're just burning carbs all the time. So the idea is to convert you from a carb burner to a fat burner. And that can be done in 2 ways. By lowering the insulin production by a diet. You have to lower your production of insulin, so you have to lower your consumption of simple carbs. And you have to increase your insulin sensitivity. And that's when you lower your sugar consumption, slowly your fat cells. It's the same analogy for traffic. Like suddenly one day there's a Super Bowl game and there's no traffic on the street. For that 1 hour, you do notice that everything's so quiet. When there's a constant buzz going on, and when you turn off that buzz, you don't realize until that buzz is going, but when you turn it off, you realize, oh, it's so quiet. So if you lower the glucose consumption, the sugar consumption, and if you lower your insulin levels, your body slowly over time will get sensitive to the effects of insulin. And the other big help in that comes from exercise, especially resistance exercises. Because resistance exercises or muscle building exercises, they sensitize your muscle cells to the effects of insulin. Because when you do resistance exercises, your muscle cells are exercised and they become sensitive, so they're able to listen to insulin because they want the nutrients, they want the proteins and amino acids and what have you for energy, they want the glycogen. So they become more sensitive to insulin. So resistance exercises are especially helpful in increasing your insulin sensitivity for your muscles. So if your muscles are ready to take the sugar, then it doesn't have to go to fat. They will take it preferentially. So that's how you can increase your insulin sensitivity. I'll get that to you in a minute. And it's all about insulin regulation. So studies of centenarians from all over the world, they did a study at Boston University. They studied, about 6,000 centenarians. And they found they have remarkable similarities. Even when some of them are long-term smokers, a lot of the centenarians, in fact the oldest woman that ever lived was a French woman She lived to an age of 122 and she smoked till she was 119. And the doctor said to quit smoking because it's going to kill her, and 3 years later, sure enough, she died. And she used to eat a pound of chocolate, hopefully it was the dark, low semi-sweet kind, but she ate a pound of chocolate every week. And she drank a lot. She was basically happy. The thing, the takeaway point from her life was she was happy. She was royalty, she was happy, didn't have stress. Stress is a very big killer, but that's for another day. So basically what they found, the similarity in all the centenarians is that they manage insulin levels well, and so they're rarely obese. They eat more wholesome, unprocessed foods, and they're typically in an urban setting, in a rural setting, sorry. In a rural setting, they're away from pollution and a lot of water pollution, air pollution, and they're more spiritual, which I would say is a better way to manage stress. I'm not saying everybody can be spiritual or religious, but it's in the sense they're able to manage stress better, because stress is a big killer. And they lead an active lifestyle, and a lot of them live in joint families, the Okinawan Japanese, and the Italians, and the Mediterranean people in the Crete, C-R-E-T-E. They're the most number of centenarians living, and they have some commonalities, that they manage stress well, they lead an active lifestyle, and they eat more wholesome, unprocessed foods. And so they manage their insulin levels. It's all about managing your insulin levels. If you can do that, you can live a long life. So now here's the thing, a calorie is not a calorie. I mean, everybody says, okay, a calorie is a calorie. You eat so many calories, you don't burn it, you're going to gain fat. But that's not really true. Actually, a calorie is not a calorie. It's not the same when it's coming from proteins or carbohydrates or fat. All calories aren't the same, and three main sources are carbs, fat, and protein. Carbs, the way they're different is that carb calories stimulate hunger. And you saw how it can do that. Carbs can make you hungry. You eat a simple carb, you eat a slice of bread, bagel in the morning, you're hungry 2 hours later. So those calories are different. They stimulate hunger. Fat calories, on the other hand, suppress hunger. You eat a morning breakfast of bagel and eggs and bacon and eggs, and you're not going to be hungry till 12 o'clock. You don't want it at 12. A couple hours later, you're fine. And fat calories suppress hunger, and protein calories actually burn more calories. Protein has a thermogenic effect, and I'll get to that in a minute. And they actually burn calories. The body has to spend energy to digest protein. So that's one advantage of eating protein. And that's the thermogenic effect of protein. Basically, in this paper, postprandial thermogenesis, postprandial meaning after you eat, right, Valerie? Thermogenesis increased by 100% on a high protein, low fat diet versus a high carbohydrate, low fat diet in healthy young women. That was a paper. So basically, they show that your basal metabolic rate is kind of like a resting rate. Your body burns energy even when you're sitting down doing nothing. That's your bit. That's pretty much the energy required to sustain basic body function for your brain, for your liver, for your vital organs to keep working. That's your basal metabolic rate. And so they found that after eating a high protein meal, your basal metabolic rate jumps up to 100%. I mean, it's 100%, they say. So that's just a relative scale, 50 to 100%. But pretty much the point is that your metabolic rate goes up after you eat a high protein meal compared to a high carb meal. And in this paper by Feynman and Fine, they showed that carbohydrates have about a 2-3% conversion deficit. Meaning, when you eat a carbohydrate, you say you eat 100 calories of carbohydrate. 2-3% of that, 2 or 3 calories is lost as heat, or thermogenesis, they call it thermogenesis. Is lost as heat, and the rest of the 97% is available for the body to use. And fat has about 7 to 8%. So fat calories, you need about 7 to 8 calories per 100 calories of fat to digest it. So some amount is lost. But proteins have about 20 to 30% efficiency. So in order to digest protein, in order to digest 100 calories of protein, your body has to spend about 20-30 calories in order to use it. So that way eating protein is advantageous. And they did, this is a This is basically the USDA diet, 55% carb, and you see the USDA diet, I forget what the exact composition, but it's 55% carbohydrates, and I think 30% fat, and the remaining in protein. So when you have that composition, and this is for a 2,000 calorie diet. So when you eat 2,000 calories of the USDA diet, you only have 1850 calories available for the body to use. The rest is lost in thermogenesis. And you see, if you reduce the amount of carbohydrates, as you go to 20%, if you eat only 20% of your calories in carbohydrates, and the rest of them you eat, you divide them equally between fat and protein. So the remaining 60%, 80%, 40% fat, 40% protein, your body only has 1750 calories. So you're 100 calories deficit. Your body has to spend 100 more calories in order to digest that food. And most diets, the Atkins, Phase 1, South Beach, etc., those diets are less than 10% carbs, and you only get a little bit over 1,700 calories for eating 2,000 calories. So you pretty much lose 300 calories. And if you translate that, this 100 calories, a pound of fat has about 3,900 calories. A pound of fat has about 3,900 calories. So if you take those 100 calories, if you're burning 100 more calories extra just by eating a different type of diet, you're expending 100 more calories. That translates to 36,500. That's about 10 pounds, a little less than 10 pounds of fat every year you lose just by switching your diet to a 20% carbohydrate. You don't have to eat any less. You just have to switch the composition, eat a little less carbs, eat more fat, more protein, and you lose 10 pounds doing nothing, just by changing that composition. Now the effect of adding fat and protein is that the fat lowers, like I mentioned many slides earlier, that fat lowers the glycemic response of a meal because it slows down the absorption of the sugar in the gut. And the example that's presented in this paper is that the GI, the glycemic index of a pure mashed potato meal is 108. And when fat and some protein is added to it, the glycemic index is only 54. So it's pretty much cut in half. They just added some palm oil and some chicken breast to it, and it reduced the glycemic index to 54. So your blood sugar doesn't spike as much if you mix in some protein and fat with it. And so the lower insulin response will mean lower weight gain. And also fat and protein add satiety to a meal, so you end up consuming fewer calories. Because you eat fat and protein, and you're not hungry to snack in between meals. And so at the end of the day, you actually end up consuming less amount of calories if you're eating more fat and protein. And there's no urge to snack between meals, and less overall calories consumed. So now, let's go back and revisit. We've started to overeat 360 calories every day. Once we started cutting fat from our diet. So does that explain the effect of removing fat from our diet? That we're starting to overeat? Maybe because we're not eating as much fat. And I know from personal experience that I can eat a lot of rice with sambar. Like I can eat a ton of it and I won't feel full. Whereas if I eat something, a chicken breast with rice, that'll fill me up faster. So in the end, I'll consume lower calories even when I'm eating more fat. So does that explain? I mean, that's just my question. I think it explains that you remove fat from your diet, you're going to end up consuming more. I mean, carbs will make you addicted. The same thing, the whole insulin resistance and everything happens. So yes, we are consuming more calories, but that's because we're removing fat. We're removing the satiety factor from our diet. So now what to eat? That's the question. What do we want to eat? So I mean, there's good carbs. We need good sources of carbs that have a lot of fiber in them, whole vegetables, low sugar fruits. Fiber also delays the absorption of sugar in the gut, so it lowers the glycemic index, it lowers the glycemic response. And good carbs are a good source of antioxidants and plant polyphenols. They're good for you in many ways. Examples are wholesome vegetables. There's certain grains, lentils, legumes, nuts and seeds, low sugar fruits, and herbs and spices. And that last one is especially important because herbs and spices have a lot of antioxidants. They have a lot of anti-cancer and they will reduce the oxidative damage, and eventually they should help in heart disease and that kind of stuff. So turmeric has been the most widely studied herb, and it has shown a lot of benefits in cancer prevention and a lot of other things. But I'll get to that in the next part of the seminar. Wholesome protein. We need wholesome protein. Whey protein is good. It's a quick acting protein. It's basically milk protein. That's good. I like to get that in shakes and after workout and stuff. Now, eggs and dairy. Everybody has a fear of eggs, but actually eggs are good. Eggs are good for you. They have, especially the yolk part of the egg. You know, they say it's high in cholesterol. It's really good for you, and especially if it's pastured eggs. That should be the preferred egg. Pastured is free. I'll show you pictures. But pastured eggs, and even pastured red meat, has the right omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acid composition that humans have traditionally evolved on. So even red meat is healthy if it's from. The problem with red meat is when it comes from factory-produced red meat, when cows that are kept in captivity and they're fed the genetically modified soy, corn, and all that, it kind of skews and they've done studies that the omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acid ratio in cattle that's grain-fed is 1:13, which is bad, and the omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acid ratio in cattle that's free pasture is 1:4. Even butter that comes from grass-fed cows has 1:4 composition of the omega fatty acids. And it's also a rich source of CLA, which has some anti-cancer properties. It has a lot of antioxidants and vitamin A. And I'll show you some pictures. And vegetarian protein, these are good sources of complete protein. Ham, chia, flax seeds. Nuts are good, almonds, walnuts, and pecans. Hazelnut, they have a good monounsaturated fats that are supposed to increase your HDLs. Avocados are good. They're a complete source of protein, and they're a very rich source of monounsaturated fatty acids. And a combination of several lentils and beans. Usually lentils and beans are typically deficient in one or two essential amino acids. And a combination of several lentils and beans can form a complete protein. So if you're a vegetarian, you could eat protein from the vegetarian sources. And I have lists of vegetarian proteins. And what you need to avoid is grain-fed, factory-produced anything. Meat, eggs, dairy, poultry, farmed fish, GMO grain, that's rampant. Every processed food in the supermarket has some form of genetically modified soy or corn derivative. I mean, you can just pick it up and it's pretty much, I'm pretty sure it's some form of GMO, corn or soy. And wholesome fats. Fat's not bad. There's cold-pressed avocado, hemp, flaxseed, and olive oil can be used as salad dressings. I mean, these oils cannot be cooked because they have fragile, they easily, the carbon-carbon bond breaks and makes free radicals, and that starts oxidative damage. That's for another day. Palm, sesame, pastured butter, and clarified butter are good for cooking because they can resist some of the heat. And the important thing to note is the smoke point of an oil. If you're cooking an oil and it starts smoking, then you're pretty much liberating free radicals. And whatever fat it is, it's going to be bad. So that way fat is bad. It can be abused in cooking. That's the bad thing with fat. Clarified butter, which is ghee, with butter fat, or refined avocado oil is the best for deep frying because it has a very high smoke point. It's over 250, 240, or 250 centigrade. And most deep frying happens at 180. So it's got plenty of room to the temperature. So it's not going to break down into free radicals. So that's the best for deep frying. And you need to avoid peanut oil, sunflower, corn, canola, and most other vegetable oils. I know canola is considered heart healthy, but at the end of the day, it's vegetable oil. It has monounsaturated fatty acids, but the problem with canola is there's YouTube videos. I haven't shown them here, but the processing, the lot of high temperature distillation, and the addition of sodium hydroxide, and they add bleaching agents just to make it look lighter, because virgin canola oil is kind of dark brownish in color. So they bleach it just to make it look lighter, so it gives the impression that it's heart healthy because it's lighter. Somehow that's the perception. So they do a lot of chemical processing, and so it's got free radicals, tons of free radicals before it even hits the store shelves. So I wouldn't recommend canola oil, commercially available refined canola oil.
What do you think for coconut oil?
Coconut oil actually is good, yeah. I haven't mentioned that, but you're right. Coconut oil is good. It has a high smoke point, not as high as butter, not as high as clarified butter or avocado oil, but it can be used for stir frying, and yeah, coconut oil is good.
How about rapeseed oil?
That's a good one. I got to forget about that. I'm not sure what the composition is. Basically, I look at how much monounsaturated fatty acids, how much linoleic acid and linolenic acid it has, and so that way I can. But I think I have a slide in the back that shows the omega composition of these fats. I can answer that.
I was going to say, so you consider palm, sesame oil and pastured butter as better cooking oils than canola?
Yeah. Yes.
3 cheers for ghee, huh?
3 cheers for ghee. I've been eating, I cook everything in butter and ghee, and my cholesterol is normal. And saturated fat, I think I mentioned, some of you were not here, saturated fat does increase your cholesterol, but it increases both HDL and LDL. So the ratio remains pretty much is unchanged. And the LDL that saturated fat increases, I'd like to mention, it's the large buoyant kind that is not implicated in heart disease, that has a shorter half-life and that is more resistant to oxidation. Carbs, on the other hand, increase the small dense LDL, which has a longer half-life and is more prone to oxidation. So the LDL that comes from eating too many carbs is actually more dangerous for you than saturated fat. As long as the saturated fat is coming from free pasture, good quality butter, not from there. And this is about 2 months ago, I think in May, 3 months ago, Time magazine came out with this article, and basically the scientists labeled fat the enemy, why they were wrong. That's what they said. And they said the butter actually has anti-cancer properties, has a lot of antioxidants, has the right omega ratios, so butter actually is good for you. And that's what they say. Now they're saying eat butter. And think about this, the average American was eating 18 pounds of lard or butter. The rich ate butter, the poor ate lard. In the 1940s, they were eating 18 pounds per person per year, and heart disease wasn't that prominent killer. And now the average American eats less than 4 pounds of saturated fat and butter, and heart disease is the #1 killer. So surely not coming from butter, something else.
Stress.
Stress, yes, stress, and then a lot of processed food. Okay. How to eat. So we did what to eat, now how to eat. For that, it's good to understand your basal metabolic, and we pretty much know that we have to not eat a lot of calories in one meal and break up the meal in several meals. And this is basically getting into the theory why that's so. Basically, your daily maintenance requirements are divided into, this is the resting metabolic rate, and your activity thermogenesis, the amount of calories you burn in activity, and that's pretty much again divided into exercise activity, that's 30%, and 70% is actually non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which is why I say it's more important what you do outside the gym than what you do in the gym that'll help you lose weight. Because people think, okay, I ran an hour on the treadmill, I don't do anything, I can eat anything, I can just sit around, do nothing. But that's not true. Actually, the amount of calories just standing up, just going to the water fountain, just bending up, picking up something, and daily moving about, doing your daily chores, actually burns more calories than what you do, what you burn in the gym, even for the most avid exerciser. So you need to be active outside the gym. That's more important than actually going and working out for an hour. And the resting metabolic rate again is divided into what the liver needs, the brain, the heart, kidneys, and this one, you cannot do anything about these 5. Skeletal muscles, and that's, I believe, this 19%. So 19% of your resting metabolic rate actually comes from skeletal muscle. So muscle tissue is active tissue that needs energy to sustain itself. So it's actually burning fat, it's actually burning energy in order to sustain itself, and that's 19% of your RMR. And I'll get to that in a minute, why resistance training is better at boosting your basal metabolic rate and at burning long-term fat than cardio, long-term cardio, or I should say chronic fatigue. So this is typically, so the activity thermogenesis is the amount of energy you burn, and that typically starts out high as we're getting ready for the day, and it typically tapers down as you go. And the basal metabolic rate is a constant. You're burning some amount of calories doing nothing, and that's what you'll keep burning even when you're sleeping. So usually what we do is we'll eat a light breakfast, we'll eat some toast or tea or what have you, and then we'll get the hunger pangs right around 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, we're starving, we want more food, and then we'll eat something. And whenever, and this is, you can consider it blood glucose, you can consider it insulin, that's how it's going to behave, and then you get the hunger pangs, and then you eat lunch, and boom, it shoots up again, and then anything that goes above the activity thermogenesis that your body is not going to use, that red triangle is going to convert to fat and store it. You have to get out of the bloodstream. And then you get the hunger pangs, you come home, 5 hours later, 7 o'clock, you're really starving, you put the TV on, and you start your TV dinner or pizza, or you eat with a family, and typically a family fare, you eat a lot of stuff, probably followed by a dessert. You're not consciously eating, you're just talking and eating. And so you typically eat a lot. And everything beyond the activity thermogenesis curve, that's all stored body fat. The body's not going to use it to store.
What is the reason for the thermogenesis to drop after, say, midday?
I mean, this is not exact. What it shows is that it is going to drop eventually. Slowly it just goes down. It probably goes up even more than maybe it does that. But this is just a schematic.
Maybe I can answer that question because I think it's the way the hormones are produced in your body. Your steroids are probably at your peak when you early in the morning,
Okay.
and they tend to decline through the day.
Oh, that's a good point. I should write that down. I'll ask you again. That's a good point. Yeah, I didn't know about that. Okay. So this is typically how we eat, and obviously this is how we should eat. We should start with a big breakfast, and
Postpone.
4 hours. So this is how we should be eating. Again, your activity thermogenesis, you should try to stay below it, so you eat a big breakfast, and you're pretty much assured that it's going to burn off during the day, and then you eat mid-meal snacks, and 3 times with the mid-meal snack. If you want, if you're hungry, you can eat a small snack before going to bed. So the action items, takeaway points from all this. You reduce the amount of easily digested carbs, and instead get them from wholesome sources of vegetables, nuts, seeds, low sugar fruits, and select grains and legumes. And you replace those carbs with healthy fats and high quality proteins. And you start the day with a high protein breakfast. That's where the protein thermogenesis, food thermogenesis comes into play. If you start your day with a high protein breakfast, and there's been studies that show a breakfast of 2 eggs compared to the breakfast of bagel, same calorie, same intake of calorie. A person eating 2 eggs for breakfast versus a person eating bagel and cream cheese for breakfast, the person eating 2 eggs, throughout the day he tends to eat less because he's more satiated, and his metabolism gets a boost, so he burns more fat, and they actually end up losing more fat, eating less number of calories compared to the guy that starts with a bagel in the morning. And the same amount of calories. It's not like this guy's overeating. Same amount of calories, he tends to overeat. So start your day with a high protein breakfast and healthy fats, and that'll boost your metabolism and it'll keep your hunger cravings at bay.
So why is it that the body doesn't feel more hungry in the morning, especially if you have slept for 8-10 hours, so low sugars? Why don't you want to eat more breakfast?
It doesn't come in initially, but after a while. Initially, I guess, again, it comes back to the hormones. Because the hormones don't start out high. When you wake up, then slowly the hormones pick up. And then your hunger probably comes, when you wake up in the morning, you're not hungry right away. But probably 2 hours later, after you take the shower, then you're probably hungry. So start your day with a high protein breakfast and healthy fats. That should boost your metabolism. And then eat in accordance to your activity thermogenesis curve. If you're active, then yes, of course you can eat more. But if you're not active, then try to eat less when you're not active. And then snack between meals to keep hunger at bay. And if you're not hungry, you don't have to snack. I mean, at any given time, if you're not hungry, don't eat. I don't believe that eating at a certain time, a certain amount of food is necessary. I know as kids we were told, okay, it's dinner time, you have to eat. But if you're not hungry, your body's telling you that it doesn't need the calories. So don't eat just because you have to. And eat the last meal at least 3 hours before bedtime. That way